She was just a sleep-deprived nurse in scrubs, racing through the airport after a 12-hour shift, until a gate mix-up landed her on a billionaire's private jet to Santorini. Now, with the Aegean Sea beneath her and the world watching, Maya Thompson must decide if a mistaken flight can lead to the right kind of love, or if this fairy tale was never hers to begin with. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The fluorescent lights of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport buzzed overhead, flickering just enough to irritate Maya Thompson's already fried nerves. Her navy blue scrubs were wrinkled. Her curly ponytail looked like a storm had passed through it, and she could feel the faint stickiness of dried antiseptic on her forearms. 12 hours on the trauma floor. No breaks, 3 code blues, 1 loss, and a baby miraculously revived by CPR. Her shoes squeaked slightly with each step, worn-down soles complaining louder than she ever could. Her duffel bag, slung over her shoulder, was digging into her collarbone. Still, she pressed on. She checked the time on her cracked phone screen. 7:05 a.m. Her flight to Fort Lauderdale was scheduled to depart at 7:30, and of course, it had to be the furthest gate in the terminal. Gate 17, or was it 7? She muttered, squinting at the departure board. The glitching screen blinked, showing scrambled characters before flashing back to the flight list. She caught Fort Lauderdale and 7 before it changed again. That was good enough. She took off down the corridor, dodging tourists dragging roller bags and business travelers sipping overpriced lattes. By the time she reached Gate 7, she was breathless. A polished woman in a navy blazer stood by the boarding tunnel, checking passes. Maya thrust her phone forward, panting. Flight to Fort Lauderdale. Sorry, I'm late. The attendant glanced at her badge. Miss Thompson? Of course. We've been expecting you. Before Maya could question the odd phrasing, the woman handed her a cool, lemon-scented tile and gestured her onto the jet bridge. She blinked. No line? No passengers? No TSA pat-down? It was strange, but she chalked it up to early boarding for medical staff. Maybe this was some airline program she didn't know about, first responders and all that. But as she walked through the tunnel, it didn't lead to a crowded commercial plane. No roaring engine, no gate agent barking about carry-on sizes. Instead, a suited man opened a polished chrome door that led directly into the cabin of a Gulfstream G650, a private jet. The interior was absurdly luxurious. Cream leather seats, real wood paneling, gold trim, and soft jazz playing through invisible speakers. A tray of chilled water bottles and fresh fruit sat on a glass-topped table. Maya froze. Wait, this can't be. A flight attendant with perfect posture approached her. Welcome aboard, Miss Thompson. May I take your bag? Sure, she said slowly, handing it over. I'll prepare your seat in the main cabin. Would you like sparkling water or cucumber mint? Cucumber mint. Moments later, Maya was reclined in a buttery soft leather seat, a warm blanket on her lap and a crystal glass of infused water in her hand. I guess this is what they mean by business class, she muttered, sipping cautiously. She leaned her head back, letting her eyes flutter closed. The fatigue of her shift caught up with her fast. Maybe she'd just close her eyes until takeoff. Behind her, in the private suite at the rear of the jet, Elias Stone, billionaire tech entrepreneur and Forbes' most eligible bachelor, sat reviewing quarterly reports on a slim silver tablet. He glanced at his assistant's text. On board and prepped for takeoff. But his assistant wasn't supposed to fly with him today. Brows knitting, Elias stood, rolled down his sleeves, and walked toward the front of the plane. As he stepped into the cabin, his sharp eyes landed on a woman, fast asleep, mouth slightly open, wearing hospital scrubs and scuffed sneakers. Who the hell is that? Elias Stone wasn't used to having strangers on his jet. His life was structured, intentional, and fiercely private, just the way he liked it. The G650 was his sanctuary, his mobile fortress of solitude in a world where everyone wanted something. So when he stepped into the cabin expecting to find an assistant or perhaps a newly hired stewardess, he didn't expect a woman in wrinkled scrubs asleep in his chair, her arm dangling over the side, clutching a phone with a cracked screen. His brow furrowed. She had dark curls that had escaped from a messy ponytail and faint dark circles under her eyes. The kind you didn't get from one bad night's sleep, but from weeks, maybe months of long, hard shifts. The flight attendant leaned in and whispered, "She boarded with clearance, sir. Her ticket scanned under your name." "My name?" he echoed, eyeing the unconscious stranger again. She stirred a little, murmuring something under her breath. She seemed in a hurry. "I assumed she was a last-minute guest or..." "She's wearing scrubs." Elias wasn't annoyed, just completely thrown off. "Does she look like someone I'd invite to Santorini?" He stepped closer, prepared to gently wake her and get to the bottom of this. But just as he leaned in, Maya stirred and shifted in her sleep, then leaned right onto his shoulder. He froze. Her head rested against him, soft curls brushing the edge of his crisp white shirt. Her breath was slow and even, her body radiating the warmth of a person who had gone too long without rest. Elias stayed completely still, arms slightly raised like a man trying not to wake a wild animal on his lap. His jaw tightened, not in anger, but sheer disbelief. This is not happening. But it was happening. On his jet, with this exhausted woman who'd clearly boarded the wrong flight and somehow passed through security measures that cost more annually than a small country's defense budget. He glanced at his flight attendant, who was biting the inside of her cheek, trying not to laugh. "Should I wake her?" she offered quietly. Elias looked down at the woman now softly snoring into his shoulder. There was a smudge of what might be chocolate pudding or something more clinical on her sleeve. "No," he said after a beat. "Let her sleep. We've taken off anyway, haven't we?" "Yes, sir. We're already in the air." He sighed and sat back. "All right then." For the next 40 minutes, Elias Stone, the man who closed billion-dollar deals over encrypted lines and dismissed luxury with a shrug, sat frozen stiff as a total stranger slept on his shoulder like it was the most natural thing in the world. And strangely, he didn't mind. When Maya finally stirred, groggy and disoriented, she lifted her head slowly and blinked several times at the bright cabin lights. Then her gaze moved sideways and landed squarely on the man she'd been leaning on. She gasped, "Oh my God! Oh my God, I fell asleep on you?" Elias turned to her, one brow raised, arms now folded. "For quite some time. I believe we skipped introductions." Maya scrambled upright, face flaming. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to wait." Her eyes darted around the ultra-luxurious cabin. This isn't Delta, is it?" He chuckled for the first time in weeks. "Not unless they've upgraded their cabins significantly." She blinked, realization hitting her like a freight train. "Oh my God, I got on the wrong plane." "Yes," Elias replied evenly. "But I must say, you're the first person to do it so charmingly." Maya's hands were practically vibrating in her lap. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment, and her heart was still in recovery mode after realizing she'd not only boarded the wrong plane but had drooled on a billionaire's shoulder. She sat perched on the edge of the luxurious cream leather seat like a scolded child, eyes darting toward the exit hatch, though they were already 30,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean. "I swear, I thought this was Gate 7 for Fort Lauderdale," she said again, fiddling nervously with the frayed cuff of her scrub pants. "The screen glitched, and I mean, they just let me walk on board." Elias Stone, now seated across from her with a whiskey glass balanced neatly in one hand, leaned back and watched her. There was a glint of amusement in his eyes, but also something quieter. Curious. Contained. He wasn't used to chaos. Not like this. Certainly not in the form of a disheveled nurse with cracked sneakers and a mouth that ran before her brain could keep up. "And you didn't notice the private jet signs? The champagne cart? The complete lack of crying toddlers?" he asked, taking a slow sip. Maya groaned and covered her face. "I just thought business class had really stepped up its game." He laughed then, deep and warm. Not the tight, performative laugh he gave investors or media handlers. This one was real. It rumbled through the cabin like a note struck on an old piano. I haven't laughed like that in a while, he admitted, setting his glass down. It's refreshing. Maya peeked through her fingers. You're being very chill about this for a guy who probably owns half of Europe. I'm a private person, not a heartless one, Elias replied, his tone more thoughtful now. You were exhausted. It was an honest mistake. Besides, it's not like we can turn the jet around mid-flight. Her shoulders relaxed just a bit. She looked out the window. The world below was a blanket of clouds. Nothing but blue sky and quiet engines. Where are we going anyway? She asked, half laughing. Santorini. Her head whipped toward him. Like Greece. That's the one. Maya whistled softly. I was trying to make it to Florida. My grandma had a fall last week. She's okay, but I wanted to see her. He studied her face then. The weariness in it. The way her eyes softened at the mention of her grandmother. Does she live alone? He asked. Yeah, Maya nodded. I send money when I can. She practically raised me. Taught me how to stitch with fishing line when I was 8. Better than my nursing school instructors. Something in the way she said it, completely unpolished, unfiltered, caught Elias off guard. People didn't usually talk to him like this. They usually tried to impress him, flatter him, or probe him for opportunities. But Maya didn't even know who he was until 10 minutes ago. She was just being Maya. What kind of nurse are you? He asked. Trauma. Emergency room, she said, stretching her legs out a bit. Adrenaline junkie, I guess. That explains the coffee stain on your sleeve, he said, smirking. She looked down. That or pudding. Honestly, I'm afraid to sniff it and find out. They both laughed again. A few moments passed in comfortable silence. The cabin was quiet, save for the hum of the engines and the occasional clink of ice in his glass. Maya leaned her head back. Can I be honest with you? Elias raised a brow. I'd prefer it. This is the first time in over a year I've sat down and not felt like the world was about to collapse. It's weirdly peaceful here. Elias looked out the window. Peaceful is rare, he said. That's why I go to Santorini. It's the one place I don't feel like I'm under a microscope. Maya turned her head toward him. You're famous, huh? He smirked. Infamous, depending on who you ask. Tech industry. Cybersecurity. I design systems to keep people from hacking billion-dollar secrets. So you're basically a digital bouncer, she said, sipping the cucumber water that had somehow magically refilled itself. Essentially. She nodded. That's kind of hot. He blinked. Excuse me? I said that out loud, didn't I? She groaned. He chuckled again. You did. But it's fine. I think the nurse who crash-landed into my jet and fell asleep on my shoulder has earned one pass. Maya grinned. Only one. The plane gently rocked as it entered a patch of turbulence. Elias's hand gripped the armrest instinctively. Maya didn't even flinch. Air pockets don't scare me, she said, closing her eyes briefly. Try being elbow-deep in someone's chest with 5 seconds left on the clock. Elias looked at her, really looked at her. The scrubs, the exhaustion, the accidental charm. The way she didn't try to apologize for her messiness, didn't shy away from his presence, or care about the layers of wealth that insulated him from the rest of the world. She was, in a word, real. And somewhere over the ocean, with 2 lives heading in opposite directions, the air between them shifted, subtle but undeniable. The wheels of the jet touched down on the runway with a soft thump, the kind of landing so smooth Maya barely noticed they'd arrived, until the flight attendant gently tapped her arm and said, "Welcome to Santorini, Miss Thompson." Maya blinked awake, unsure if she'd drifted off again. She rubbed her eyes, still groggy from the time change, the altitude, and the emotional whiplash of the last 12 hours. Elias stood already, buttoning the front of a linen blazer over a crisp white shirt. He looked every bit the billionaire in vacation mode, relaxed but sharply put together. His eyes flicked to her and, just briefly, they softened. "You survived the flight without climbing out the emergency hatch," he said, reaching for a sleek pair of sunglasses. "I still can't believe I'm here," she mumbled, rising slowly. Like here. In Greece. And not in Florida sitting on my grandma's plastic-covered couch, eating soup from 1998. The door of the jet opened with a hiss. A warm Mediterranean breeze spilled into the cabin, carrying with it the scent of sea salt, jasmine, and distant lemon groves. Maya stepped onto the mobile staircase, shielding her eyes as sunlight flooded the tarmac. The sky stretched in all directions, a perfect canvas of powder blue. The mountains in the distance looked like storybook paintings, and the iconic whitewashed buildings climbed the hills like pearls on a string. She stared in silence. "You all right?" Elias asked from behind her. I've never seen anything so beautiful," she said softly, almost to herself. A sleek black Mercedes Sprinter van with tinted windows waited at the bottom of the steps. The driver stepped out and bowed slightly at Elias, who responded with a polite nod before turning back to Maya. "You don't have to come with me," he said, his voice measured now. "I can have the jet fly you back wherever you need to go." Maya turned to him, one hand on the stair rail. "And explained to Homeland Security that I accidentally boarded a billionaire's jet and ended up on the wrong continent? I think I'll pass." Elias cracked a grin. "Fair point." The drive through the winding cliffside roads of Santorini was straight out of a dream. Maya sat by the window, slack-jawed as she stared at the endless sea on one side and villages carved into cliffs on the other. Blue-domed churches and cobbled paths flashed by in a blur. When they arrived at the villa, she had to take a full 30 seconds before stepping out of the van. It was perched right on the edge of a caldera, its white marble walls glowing in the sunlight. Bougainvillea spilled over archways like ribbons. The infinity pool looked like it spilled straight into the Aegean. "This place is," she trailed off, then turned to Elias. "Okay, you win. This is literally a Bond villain lair." "It's a rental," he said casually, stepping inside. The staff, already waiting, took their bags. Maya felt deeply self-conscious as her scuffed sneakers squeaked on the flawless stone tiles. She walked into the lobby, eyes wide, already feeling out of place again. "I'm not dressed for this," she muttered. "You mean the scrubs?" Elias asked with a glance over his shoulder. "I look like I just performed an emergency appendectomy in Terminal C." "Honestly," he said with a smirk, "it's growing on me." He led her to a side hallway, where a second villa branched off the main property. This one was smaller, still luxurious but more private, its own terrace, a plunge pool, and views that looked like someone had photoshopped reality. "I figured you'd want your own space," he said. Maya stopped in the doorway, stunned. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," he said quietly, "but I wanted to." She stepped inside and spun slowly, taking it in. The wide bed, the silk curtains swaying in the breeze, the welcome basket of fruit and pastries. She reached for a peach and bit into it before thinking. "Oh my God," she said, eyes wide. "It tastes like actual sunshine." Elias laughed. "You've been living on vending machine snacks, haven't you?" "I'd kill for a Twix right now, actually." A moment passed. Maya looked at him, something unspoken hanging in the air. Gratitude. Wonder. A slow realization that despite the absurdity of how she got here, she felt safe. Wanted even. As the sun began its slow descent over the sea, Elias returned to her doorway. "There's a welcome dinner tonight at the main villa," he said. "Just me, some fresh seafood, and the sunset. You're invited. I don't exactly have a dress. I'll have one sent up." She blinked. "Do you always have women's dresses in reserve?" "No," he said, smiling. "But I've got connections." He left her with that, retreating back to his side of the villa. Maya stood still, a peach still in her hand, the sea wind curling around her ankles. She turned slowly to the view again. From tired nurse in an airport terminal to dinner in a Santorini villa with a man who looked like he belonged on a magazine cover. This wasn't just a detour. This was the beginning of something she couldn't quite name. By the time dusk fell across the island, Santorini looked less like a postcard and more like a dream soaked in amber light. Lanterns flickered along narrow paths, casting gold onto whitewashed walls. Somewhere far below, the Aegean murmured softly like it was telling secrets. Maya stood barefoot in her villa, fresh from a long, lavender-scented soak in the marble tub. She wrapped herself in the plush robe, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her curls were drying into soft spirals around her face, her skin flushed from the heat. She still couldn't believe it. This morning she'd been elbow-deep in gauze and adrenaline, snatching a granola bar between trauma cases. Now she was staring at her own face in a luxury villa in Greece. And in the corner of the room, draped over a chair, was the most breathtaking gown she'd ever seen. It was slate blue off-shoulder, with delicate embroidery across the bodice that looked like it had been sewn by moonlight. A matching mask lay beside it, silver with glass-beaded accents, like something stolen from a Venetian opera. She stared at the ensemble, speechless. A knock at the door startled her. She pulled the robe tighter and opened it a crack. Elias stood there, changed from his usual minimalist aesthetic into a tailored black tux with satin lapels. He held a narrow white box in one hand and looked slightly amused. "You okay?" he asked. "You look like someone handed you an Oscar by mistake." "I'm trying to figure out whether I should thank you or run," she said, blinking at the gown. "This looks expensive." "It was delivered from Athens this afternoon," he said casually, then handed her the box. "Shoes. Try not to faint." Maya took the box, shook her head. "Is this how you usually treat accidental guests?" He looked at her for a beat too long. "No, not even close." She swallowed. That look, it was subtle, but there was something in it. Something quiet and waiting. "I'll be ready in 20 minutes, she said, stepping back and closing the door gently. 40 minutes later, she emerged from the villa, her curls pinned up loosely, her shoulders bare in the cool evening breeze. The gown shimmered with every step she took, and the heels, elegant, silver, and way too high, made her feel like a stranger in her own body. Elias was waiting at the garden gate, masked in sleek black with a velvet trim. When he saw her, he actually stopped breathing for a moment. "Maya," he said, and it wasn't a greeting, it was a revelation. She gave a little twirl. "Do I look like I belong?" "You look like the reason the rest of the world stops spinning," he said softly. She froze for half a heartbeat, then rolled her eyes playfully. "You're dangerous when you talk like that. And yet you still came out here." They didn't say anything else as they walked to the car waiting at the villa gates. The driver opened the door wordlessly, and soon they were coasting through the candlelit streets of Santorini toward a cliff-top estate glowing like a palace above the sea. The masquerade was already underway when they arrived. Strings of lights stretched across a garden terrace overlooking the caldera. Laughter bubbled through the night like champagne, and a quartet played slow, haunting music near a marble fountain. Everyone wore masks, gold, silver, feathered, glittering. No one recognized Elias. That was the point. He placed a steadying hand on Maya's lower back as they entered, guiding her through the crowd with effortless grace. She felt every nerve ending in her spine light up at his touch, even though he was barely touching her at all. "This is not my world," she whispered as they passed women in silk gowns and men with titles stitched into their tuxedos. He leaned closer. "It doesn't have to be your world. It just has to be tonight." That answer shouldn't have felt like a promise, but it did. They dined under the stars, grilled octopus, wild olives, sun-drenched tomatoes, and lamb so tender it barely held shape. Maya drank wine that tasted like honey and storms, laughing more than she had in months. It was only after the third course that the dancing began. A soft waltz floated across the terrace, and couples glided to the floor like petals on water. Elias stood and extended his hand toward her. Maya hesitated. "I don't know how to waltz." "I do," he said, his hand still waiting. "Trust me." She took it. He pulled her close, one hand settling on the small of her back, the other guiding her hand to his chest. They moved slowly, perfectly in rhythm with the music. "You're full of surprises," she murmured. "I was thinking the same about you," he replied, his voice just above a whisper. Her heart beat wildly in her chest, not from the dance, but from the way he was looking at her through the mask, like he'd known her for years and had only just noticed how beautiful she really was. They turned again and again, the world slipping away. Just the music. Just the stars. Just the gravity pulling them closer than they had any right to be. When the music slowed to a final, lingering note, they didn't separate right away. She was still in his arms, her breath warm against his collar. He took a step back slowly. "Come with me," he said, his voice low. She followed him through an archway wrapped in vines and tiny glowing lanterns. They stepped onto a private balcony carved into the cliffside, away from the others. Below, the Aegean stretched endlessly, black and glittering. He turned to face her. "You make everything quieter." She blinked. "That's either the sweetest or most confusing thing anyone's ever said to me." He smiled, but only with his eyes. "You're not trying to impress me. You're not performing. You're just yourself." She took a step closer, unsure whether it was the wine or the sea air or something much more dangerous. "You like that?" she whispered. He nodded. "I've forgotten what real feels like." They stood so close now, the distance between them could have been broken by a breath. And then, as if drawn by something far beyond decision, he kissed her. Softly at first. Testing. Asking. She didn't pull away. Instead, she kissed him back, like the world had always been leading her here. The morning after the masquerade felt different. Not just because the sea breeze had turned cooler, or because the sky was layered in soft clouds instead of the usual boundless blue, but because something unspoken now hung between Maya and Elias. Maya awoke wrapped in linen sheets that smelled like salt water and citrus. For a few moments, she let herself stay still, watching how the breeze toyed with the sheer white curtains. Everything was too beautiful, too surreal, and the weight in her chest, it didn't match the view. Last night had been a fantasy. The gown, the lights, the music, the kiss. God, that kiss. It hadn't been just a spur of the moment, tipsy accident. She felt it, in every part of her. Elias had kissed her like he'd been waiting to do it for years, not hours. But now, in the sunlight, it scared her. She wasn't this girl. She wasn't the woman in silk, dancing on cliffside terraces. She was the woman who spent her nights suctioning blood out of shattered lungs, who couldn't afford a one-bedroom apartment without picking up extra shifts. She got out of bed, padded barefoot across the tile floor, and stared at herself in the mirror. Her hair was a mess again, makeup smudged under her eyes. She still looked like Maya, the nurse, the girl with student debt and orthopedic sneakers. Not the woman of billionaire kisses under a starlit sky. Across the villa compound, Elias stood at the edge of his infinity pool, barefoot and shirtless, holding a black coffee in one hand and a phone in the other. The screen buzzed constantly, stock updates, investor alerts, a problem brewing in the Jakarta office. He didn't look at any of it. Instead, he stared at the sea and thought about the woman in the blue gown. About how she'd looked up at him with something so raw in her eyes that it made his chest ache. He'd kissed plenty of women before. Women far more practiced in the game of power and elegance. But none of them ever made him feel nervous. Or human. And none of them had fallen asleep on his shoulder in hospital scrubs. He looked up just in time to see Maya crossing the garden, barefoot, wrapped in a blanket like a makeshift robe. Her face was unreadable. "Morning," he called, trying not to let his heart leap into his throat. She gave a half-smile. "You always drink your coffee shirtless and brooding?" "Only when I'm trying to impress someone." Her smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. That didn't go unnoticed. He set the mug down and turned toward her. "Something wrong?" She looked away. "I think I'm just crashing. Emotionally. After everything." "Last night?" he asked gently. She nodded. He stepped closer, but not too close. "I didn't plan for any of this, Maya." "I didn't either," she said quickly. "I mean, this is your life. Private jets. Villas. Tailored tuxedos. Masquerade balls. And you save lives," he said, cutting her off. "I barely afford rent," she corrected, voice tightening. "I've got 3 credit cards and a student loan I pretend doesn't exist. I work back-to-back shifts and sometimes cry in the supply closet just because I'm tired of pretending I can handle it all." She folded her arms. And then I end up on a billionaire's jet by accident, and suddenly I'm Cinderella in a ball gown, kissing you on a balcony like I belong here. Elias said nothing. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to tell her he'd felt more real in one night with her than in years of calculated success. Finally, he spoke. I grew up broke, too, you know. She blinked. My mom worked nights at a diner and cleaned houses during the day. I watched her burn out before she hit 50. I started coding because it was the only thing I could do alone that didn't make me feel small. I built everything I have from nothing. No trust funds. No safety nets. Maya's shoulders slowly relaxed just a little. But the higher I climbed, the more alone I felt, Elias continued. People see the plane, the villa, the suits. They don't see me. He paused, met her eyes. You saw me, Maya. Without even trying. A long silence passed between them, filled only by the sound of the sea. I'm scared, she said, voice soft. Because I like you. And I don't know what that means in a world where we don't even belong to the same reality. Elias stepped closer, eyes serious. Then let's figure it out. No pressure. No timelines. Just today. She stared at him for a long time. Then finally she nodded. Okay. Just today. He smiled. Deal. Good, she said, turning to walk back toward her villa. But just so you know, if tomorrow gets weird, I'm stealing your jet and going home. He laughed, watching her disappear around the corner, a little spark of hope lighting somewhere deep in his chest. It started with a single photo. A wide shot taken from the upper balcony of the masquerade ball, the kind of picture you'd find in a luxury travel blog. Dreamy, romantic, sparkling with fairy lights. But this photo had one undeniable focus. Elias Stone dancing with a mystery woman in a slate blue gown, their masked faces nearly touching, their bodies aligned with a tenderness that made it impossible to believe it was just a dance. By morning, it was everywhere. Who is the woman with billionaire Elias Stone in Santorini? Mystery nurse or secret heiress? Elias Stone spotted with unknown beauty at exclusive Greek ball. Maya didn't see it until she picked up the hotel tablet at breakfast to check the weather. The homepage was splashed with her own blurry image. Her profile partially turned, laughing, eyes shining beneath a silver mask. She dropped the tablet like it burned. Elias was on a call across the villa compound when she marched barefoot into his living room. I'm on hold, he said, holding up a finger, but the look on her face made him pause. She threw the tablet down on the couch beside him. He picked it up, read the headline, and frowned. Shit. You think, she snapped. My boss texted me this article this morning with a winky face. My friends are blowing up my phone. And my grandmother just called me to say I'm apparently dating the software fella on the news. Elias hung up mid-call and stood. I didn't plan for this to happen. I've never brought anyone public. Never. Well, I definitely didn't plan on being your public anything. I boarded the wrong flight, remember? I was in scrubs, Elias. He winced. She began pacing. Now everyone's asking questions I don't have answers to. Was this a fling? Am I your new girlfriend? Am I for sale? Because apparently that's what people think when a nurse ends up on a billionaire's arm. You're none of those things, he said quietly. Well, I don't know what I am anymore, she replied, her voice cracking just slightly. I was supposed to visit my grandmother. I was supposed to be back at work tomorrow. I had a life, a chaotic, underpaid, amazing life. And now I'm here, in paradise, falling for a man I shouldn't even have met, and the whole world has opinions about it. Elias stepped forward. His voice was calm, steady. Then don't let them decide anything. Not the headlines. Not your co-workers. Not even me. She stopped pacing. I care about you, Maya. And yes, this is messy. And fast. And ridiculous. But that doesn't make it fake. She shook her head. You don't understand. People like me don't get caught in stories like this without becoming the punchline. You think people haven't laughed at me? He said. I was 19, pitching security software in a hoodie while companies handed contracts to men twice my age in designer suits. They called me arrogant, lucky, dangerous, until I made them obsolete. That's not the same. You're right. You're more impressive. You've saved more lives than I ever will. Maya looked away, chewing the inside of her cheek. I don't know how to be with someone like you. You don't have to know, he said. You just have to want it. He crossed the space between them, gently taking her hands. I can make the noise go away, he said. I can call in PR teams, shut down interviews, even fly you home if that's what you want. She met his eyes, troubled, conflicted, but undeniably moved. I don't want to disappear, she said. I just want to understand what this is. He took a breath. I don't know what it is yet, but I know it's not casual, and I know it's not over. She stared at him, heart slamming against her ribs. Then slowly she pulled her hands away. I need space. He nodded, jaw tightening, though his disappointment showed. I'll arrange for the jet, he said quietly. You can leave any time you want. Thank you, she whispered, her eyes burning. But I think I'll walk first. She turned and stepped outside. The sky had turned silver with thick clouds. The air smelled of rain. She walked barefoot down the path toward the cliffs, the breeze tugging at her curls, her dress from the night before still hanging on a chair behind her, forgotten. Somewhere below, waves crashed against ancient volcanic stone. The world had found her. And now she had to find herself again, before she could know if she wanted to find her way back to Elias. The next morning, Santorini was quiet. Too quiet. Maya stood at the edge of her private terrace, a warm mug of tea in her hands, staring out at the sea like it might answer the questions crowding her head. The sun was barely cresting the horizon, casting long golden fingers over the rooftops and cliffs. Her duffel bag sat by the door. Packed. The jet was ready. Elias had arranged everything without a word. No arguments, no begging. No drama. It only made her heart hurt more. Because for all the glitter and luxury, Elias Stone hadn't tried to buy her, convince her, or manipulate her into staying. He had simply given her space. And that was what made her fall for him all over again. She took a slow sip of tea and closed her eyes, listening to the quiet symphony of morning, distant waves, the clink of dishes from a nearby cafe, a donkey braying somewhere in the hills. Everything felt surreal. She'd come to this island by accident. And now leaving didn't feel like going home. Her phone buzzed. A single text from her grandmother. Whatever he is, if he made you glow like that, he's not a mistake. Maya laughed softly through a tight throat. Trust her grandmother to see straight through the fog. She turned just as a knock echoed from the front door. Heart stuttering, she opened it, half expecting Elias, but instead found a young woman in a sleek black blazer. His assistant, polite and expressionless. Miss Thompson, she said with a slight bow. Mr. Stone asked me to deliver this personally. She held out a manila envelope. Maya took it, thanked her, and closed the door gently. She opened the envelope with nervous fingers, revealing a small folder inside. Documents. Flight itinerary. A letter. And a note, handwritten in blue ink, unmistakably Elias's. Maya, I don't know where we go from here, but I know you didn't land in my life by accident. You don't need my world, but I think I need yours. If you get on that plane, I'll understand. If you stay, I'll meet you at the edge of the terrace. Her hands trembled slightly as she lowered the paper. She walked to the French doors, pulled them open, and froze. There, at the edge of the stone terrace where sea met sky, stood Elias. He didn't wear a suit or a mask or an ego. Just linen pants, a white t-shirt, and bare feet. Like her. Real. Vulnerable. He turned slowly at the sound of the doors, meeting her eyes. I thought you left, he said, voice low. I was going to, she replied, stepping toward him. The wind tangled her hair, but she didn't care. Not anymore. She walked until they stood just a few feet apart, the sea stretching endlessly behind him like a painting. I'm still scared, she admitted. Still unsure. Me too, he said without hesitation. But I don't want to disappear from this, she whispered. I don't want to wake up tomorrow wondering what could have happened if I'd just tried. Elias's expression didn't change, but his shoulders lowered. His breath caught. His eyes, always sharp, always watching, glimmered like glass catching morning light. He reached for her hand slowly, as if asking permission. She let him take it. "I've never asked anyone to stay before," he said. "But I'm asking you." She smiled, just barely. "So, we're staying?" "For a while," he said. "No fairy tale. Just days. One after the other." "Sounds like the most romantic thing I've ever heard." He laughed softly. "We can start with breakfast. Can I wear my scrubs?" He grinned. "Only if I get to wear mine." She leaned in, resting her head against his chest. His arms wrapped around her like they'd always belonged there. Below, the waves crashed softly against the ancient cliffs of Santorini. Above, the sun stretched higher into the sky. They stood like that, quiet, close, anchored not by money or circumstance, but by choice. Not because of the jet, not because of fate, but because sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin with the wrong gate and end with the right person. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.